Okay, cool. So before we actually get into coding things, let me show everyone where the backend textbook is that Jessica mentioned. So this is going to be where all the information of like your lectures, your assignments are going to be. We're going to post this on the ed discussion, but make sure you bookmark this because it's going to be really important. You can see here that like our recordings are going to be here, our ed discussion is going to be here, our like chapters with all the assignments are going to be here. So yeah, make sure you have a way to access this. So yeah, I'm just going to leave this up for a sec, but yeah, make sure you have that. And then, okay, does anyone need me to like pause before we move on? Cool. Okay, so first lecture is routes. See on the left here, I don't know if it's like too small, but if you zoom in, under chapters, you can see our first topic, which is routes. So let's just click on that. Let's click on pre-class to-dos. And hopefully a lot of you have done this. I think I mentioned it in the initial email. But we're going to be using Postman, Python, and a text editor of your choice. In our class, we're going to be using Visual Studio Code. But if you have all three of those things, we can get started. Also, I'm going to be coding in this live demonstration. We have our lovely course co-instructor and a few other TAs in the corner over here. So if you need help at any point, feel free to raise your hands and the TAs will run around and help you guys. Cool. So I actually need to download Postman. Sorry. I had a new computer over summer and I don't think I have. Actually, do I? No, I do not. But in the meantime, once we're in the pre-class to-dos for this chapter, you can go ahead and click on the demo starter code. You might have to refresh the site or like come back to it and download it if you've already downloaded it, because I kind of updated something just a few minutes before class. But let's go ahead and download that. And once that's downloaded, open your like file explorer or finder, whatever it may be, and just like put it in the location of your choice. So I have a folder for app dev stuff, and for this course, I'm going to be putting all the demos under the demo. Sorry, it's a bit small. I put the demo folder. And then we can go ahead and unzip this, and it should give us a folder with two files, an app.py and requirements.txt. Cool. So now, does anyone need help or is not yet at this stage yet? Very cool. Awesome. So we have two files here, as you can see. Now I'll be going into the terminal. Sorry, it's kind of messy. My terminal. And also feel free to let me know if the text size is too small at any point. I'm willing to accommodate that as much as needed. So let's just cover a few terminal commands that's going to be really important for you to, be familiar with the terminal in both the, in the backend course, but as well as like your future endeavors in CS. So the first command I'm going to be covering is pwd, which is short for print working directory. It'll kind of just like tell you where in your folder directory you currently are. So I'm in my root directory, which is like where all my files are stored, like basically the root folder of everything. ls, short for list, lists out all the folders and files in that current like folder that you're in. So you can see I have a lot of my folders listed here. cd is change directory. So this will allow you to go into a folder. So you can see here that I have a lot of folders. Oops. And I want to change into the app dev folder. Then I can just type cd app dev. And now I'm in my app dev folder as indicated up here. Then I can ls again and see that I have a backend course folder. So I can cd into that, ls again, cd into my demo. And if I ls here, I can see that, kind of follows the hierarchy that's kind of shown in my visual finder, my visual folder explorer. I have my source folder with my two files. Anyone have any questions so far? Good. Awesome. So let's cd again, finally into my source folder. And I have this little shortcut that I can do, which I can say I'll show you how to do that in a second. But I can type code and then the directory that I want to open. So like the folder I want to open with this code command. Just open this real quick. So the dot symbol refers to the current directory. So my source folder that I just changed into. So if I specify that I want to run this code command on my current directory, it'll open whatever's in that current directory in VS Code, which is my text editor. I believe if you open VS Code for the first time and you go to help command palette, I don't know if this is the same for Windows users, but if you go to command palette and then look for this shell command install code path or install code command in path, and you click this, you should be able to use that command from your terminal as well. It's really useful because you can just like kind of open whatever folder you're currently in. But that's not entirely necessary. If you don't know how to do that, you can just open a new VS Code window. If you click on this file button on the top left, there's a button that says open folder, and it'll take you to your folder navigating screen. So I can just like go ahead and open it here as well. But yeah, useful little shortcut that a lot of you would ideally get familiar with. Cool. Any questions so far? No? Everything makes sense so far? Amazing. All right, so let's start looking into these two files. I'm going to open a terminal in my VS Code, which you can do as well. If you have VS Code open, you can click on the terminal button on the top. Sorry if that's a bit small. But if you click on terminal, there's a button that says new terminal. So you can click that. And it'll kind of just open a new terminal in your VS Code rather than having to switch between tabs. So that's also nice to have. And with that, right, I'm in my current directory, pwd, my directory that I just like kind of dug into, which is today's demo. And we have two files, app.py and requirements.txt. So the first thing we're going to do is create a virtual environment. Now, Jessica covered this in lecture, but just to quickly recap, a virtual environment is like the environment that you're going to be working on, and it has packages. Now, what are packages? I'm sure a lot of you have only taken 1110, so this might not be particularly familiar. Say you're trying to build a robotics project and you're building like a robot, right? And you buy these gears from like a manufacturer, and this manufacturer makes like a different version of a gear that doesn't work with your robot anymore. You wouldn't want that. So you would only want the original gear, which is kind of analogous to the versions that's specified in your requirements.txt. So libraries are tools that you're going to be using for your code, and each of these versions are really, really important. If you have mismatching versions, your code is just simply not going to run. So make sure you have a virtual environment for each of your projects. That way, each project will have its isolated environment with its appropriate versioned tools. Does that make sense? Hopefully, yeah. Cool. So the way we're going to make a virtual environment is by going into the terminal and typing Python 3. Is this visible by everyone in the back? Cool. Okay. Oh yeah, there's like a screen over there, right? Okay. Python 3-m venv. This is just something you're going to get used to typing. Not really a point in explaining everything, but -m stands for using the module called venv, which is short for virtual environment. And this is the name of your virtual environment. By standard practice, please call your virtual environments venv for all of your projects. So I'm just going to click enter. And if you look on my left-hand side, you can see that a new virtual environment folder has been created, right? So with this venv folder created, I can run a command, which I think is different on Windows. There's a tab in the textbook that shows you how you can activate a virtual environment. Essentially, activating a virtual environment is like activating those tools, those libraries that I just mentioned earlier. So for Mac, it's going to be this command, which I'll run shortly. And then on Windows, it's going to be this different command. I think this is where people are going to start getting tripped up. So again, if you need help, feel free to raise your hand. So I'm going to go ahead and activate my virtual environment. And if you're on a standard terminal, there should be like a little bracket that says venv to the left of your command prompt, like right here, if you have your virtual environment activated. Cool. And the way you can deactivate this virtual environment is just by typing deactivate. And then this is also going to be highlighted on the textbook. So if you ever need help, again, just make sure you go back to the textbook and look for the commands there. So I'm going to reactivate my virtual environment. And now that I'm in my virtual environment specific for this project, I want to install my dependencies. I want to kind of activate these tools, like kind of order the gears from the manufacturer, right? So the way I do that in the terminal is by typing pip3. For a lot of you, simply pip might work. Install -r for recursively, which means do all of these. And then specify the file name where all your tools and your like libraries are listed, which would be requirements.txt. So if I hit enter here, it's going to run, it's going to say a bunch of things. This is basically telling me that all of these requirements have been installed. Cool. Any questions so far? This is going shockingly smoothly. No questions? Are we all good? Okay, so we have our requirements set up to start actually using the backend that we're going to be developing. So that's how you install dependencies. That's how you activate a virtual environment. Cool. So that's basically the whole point of this requirements.txt file. Now we can go ahead and look at our app.py file. Oops, wrong. Oops, what did I just press? Okay. So this app.py file has a few lines of code. I'm going to briefly go over what each of these do. Also, this is kind of annoying. We've had this over multiple semesters in a row, but this Flask is like going to be squiggly lined. Just ignore it. Yeah, what's up? Oh, I can that. So for those of you familiar with Python syntax, this is kind of just a way to use external libraries or external files, like basically code from other files that's going to be useful to your code. And in this scenario, I'm kind of just like using one of the libraries that I aforementioned to use in my code. This line right here creates the app object, which is basically going to be our backend service. We'll get a bit more into that later. If a lot of you, I'm assuming, have taken either 1110 or Java in high school, this is the main function. So when you run this file, this is a command that's, or this is the code that's going to run. And it just says app.run, which is a function within this Flask library. Host, which is going to be your URL or like the domain. The port, which I think is 8000 on your guys's code. Change it to 8000 if you're on an M1 Mac, by the way. It's going to cause some annoying issues. And debug equals true just means that it's going to output a lot of debug messages for us. It's going to be useful when we're trying to fix our code. And then we'll get into this in a sec. But does anyone have any questions so far? All good? Okay, cool. Yeah, what's up? Okay, so it says that there's no requirements.txt in your current folder.
It just says no message file directly to the
requirements.txt. Okay, so that means that your terminal is probably not in the right location. If you type p or if you type ls, right, it's supposed to list all the files and all the folders in your current directory, like the folder that you're currently in. And if you don't see requirements.txt, that means that you're in the wrong folder. Yeah, Maria. Cool. Awesome, thanks, Maria. Okay, so yeah, with that out of the way, if all of us have installed our dependencies, we can actually go ahead and already start using our backend service. So the way we're going to do that is just by running this Python file, which is going to be very familiar with you if you've taken 1110. You just type Python 3 and then the name of the file, so app.py. This might also cause a few issues historically. So raise your hand if you need help. All right, we need 1% help there. 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. Okay. Thanks, DAs. All right.
Excuse me.
Yeah, soon.
I'm on Python 3.8.8.
Uh-huh.
That's giving me some problems.
Is it something about like collections?
I have no idea.
What does it say? What does the error say?
Mateo.
I mean, I just tried to do the sudo.
Collections?
Yeah.
Okay, if people are getting like the collections issue, it might be that your Python version is not updated. So we're matching the Python version with the version of 1110 this semester. So if you want to check your Python version, type Python 3. Oh, why is my keyboard in Japanese? Python 3 -- version. Yeah. 3.9.12 is a version of Python CS 1110 this semester. I know 3.10 works. I'm not sure about earlier versions of 3.9, and I'm pretty sure 3.8 doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not working? Okay. So this is always a setup problem that happens at the beginning of the semester. Please don't panic. We have a lot of office hours every day. So for now, I guess you can only just like follow along. Hopefully get the assistance of the TAs, but yeah, you can downgrade. I can make an ed post about that. About lowering versions.
Just, you know what?
Like make a number about that post and like who the officer.
Yeah.
There's like a general.
Yeah. What's up?
So, can you, this is Visual Studio, is that
Yeah.
okay? Can you do it on Python or no?
Yeah, you can do everything. There's like text editor of your choice. If you really want, you can use like Vim, which I'll show you. Like,
Well, that's some most of them are on 0.2.
10.0.2?
Oh, yeah, for person. I think that's what.
You mean 1.0.2?
Yeah, that's what.
Oh, if these requirement versions are different on your computer, it might be that like I updated the textbook after you guys downloaded the file. So go to the textbook and download the new code in the pre-class to-dos. I didn't update this until a few days ago. So if you downloaded before that, your requirement versions might be different and it might be giving you errors.
I downloaded it during class and I didn't.
Okay, can you try refreshing the page? Because Gitbook is like really annoying with that stuff. If you've already visited the page once, it's like it like caches that page and kind of messes with the download stuff. Okay, so I think this is as far as we're gonna get in this lecture. We have again an attendance Kahoot to track attendance. So we're gonna start that soon. If you have Python issues, feel free to stay behind. The instructors and the TAs are gonna stay behind and help you guys out. But kind of just for the rest of the class, we're just waiting. We're gonna get started with the Kahoot because we have 4 minutes left. So, all right, hello. Cool. It's recording. Yeah. Can people in the back hear me? Cool. All right. Can you guys see this too? Is it big enough? Okay. Cool. Welcome back to Intro to Backend. Today we'll be finishing the demo that we started on Monday. There'll be a lot to cover, so hopefully you guys are ready. Unfortunately, I'm not gonna have time to kind of address issues that were present last lecture. If you had problems, hopefully in the future you come to office hours. But if you're still trying to figure out the dependency stuff, this ed discussion post has like the correct dependencies. So go ahead and copy and paste this into your requirements.txt and go through the virtual environment creating process again. So today we'll be talking about how we can communicate to a server through a client, right? The client being my laptop, and the server also being my laptop for today's case because I'm running things locally. But anyway, we're gonna figure that out. So cool. So I'm just gonna recap how to get into like the code that we ended off on last time. So actually, let me just. So let's say I open up a new terminal. I'm on my home directory, and I want to change my directory into this demo code. Then I can just do cd, right? Change directory into app.dev. Another thing you can do actually is like type a slash and then type the next folder's name. So you don't have to like keep cding into like individual folders. So in this case, I can do cd slash backend course. And if I hit tab, it'll also autocomplete slash demo one slash source. And then now I'm in the source folder. And then ls again lists all the files in your folder. So using the shorthand I used last lecture, I'm going to open this in my code editor, my text editor, code dot. And here we are. This is what we saw last time. We have a virtual environment with our dependencies, our app.py with the minimal amount of code from last time, and then the requirements.txt. Okay, everyone good so far? This is last time, yeah? Amazing. So I'm going to open up a new terminal again. And when you open up a new terminal, I think depending on like some of the setup stuff you might have on your computer, it will automatically activate your virtual environment. But if that isn't the case, you're going to have to remember to activate your virtual environment every time. And again, the way to do that, at least on a Mac, is .venv bin activate. So with my virtual environment active, I can run this Python script, right? The way we do that is Python 3 app.py, same as last time. And you can see that it's giving me a bunch of like logs telling me that something is running on port 8000, which is this number right here. So again, a URL can be kind of composed of like multiple parts, like Jessica mentioned last lecture. So for example, if we're on the textbook, I'm sorry, it's a bit small, but you can see backendcourse.cornerapp.com. This is the domain. So the domain, when trying to access something on our local computer, would be localhost. Maybe if a lot of you have played Minecraft, you know, like local servers are called localhost. That is why. So I'm going to hit localhost, and then you can see it's already autofilling. And then I type colon and then the number of my port, which is 8000. So it's printing hello world. Now let's talk about why it's doing that. Okay. Show of hands, who has not heard of what a function or a method is? Okay, we all know what a function or a method is, right? So in Python, if you haven't learned Python before, the syntax of creating a function is by typing def for like define, and then the function name, your parameters, and then the function body. So similar to Java, except instead of like function, it'd be def, and then instead of the curly braces, it'd be the colon. So I'm just creating a function here. The way the front end communicates with the back end, or like the way you kind of specify which function to hit when the front end hits like an endpoint, is this thing called app.route. So this app.route thing is always going to be the same. The thing that's going to be different is like whatever is in the string. So the string is what follows the localhost colon 8000. So if I say type, I don't know, ABC here instead, right? Then if I try to hit localhost 8000, and by default, the slash kind of just like always precedes it. If I try to hit this, it's going to say that this URL was not found. Now, instead, since I typed this /ABC, if I hit localhost 8000 /ABC, now you can see that this hello function is hit. So here is where we specify what the URL is going to be after the localhost 8000. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. And then here's the function name and the function body, right? So like this is returning hello world. If I change this to like hello Shungo, then it'll print hello Shungo when I hit this endpoint. The really neat thing about Flask, by the way, is when the server is active, I don't have to like shut it back down and then start it back up for changes to take effect. The moment you save your files, the changes will make effect. So that's also something that's like really neat about Flask, which is why we're going to be using it for this course. Cool. So does the anatomy of this make sense? Does the syntax of this make sense? Yeah. Awesome. Then we're going to start actually creating a backend that's going to be functional for us. So to do that, we're going to have to do a few things. We're going to have to import a few libraries that aren't listed here yet. So the first thing is by typing import JSON. This allows us to interact with JSON type data, which is the data type we're going to be using to like send and receive data from the front end. And then the next thing is from Flask, we have to import this package called request. And what this request thing does is, again, the front end sends a request to the back end, and then the back end returns a response to the front end, right? So this request package allows us to kind of like dig through the information that was sent to us from the front end. So these are the two packages we're going to install. Everything else is fine so far. So let's go ahead and actually start creating a backend. So for this very, very first demo, we're going to be making a to-do app. A to-do app that lists tasks for us to do. The task is going to contain a description and whether it's like done or not, right? So the way we're going to represent data in this demo is through a Python dictionary. For those of you familiar with Java, that's equivalent to a hash map. So we'll make a variable called tasks. And each task is going to be represented with a key value pair. The key is going to be the ID of the task, right? You've probably heard of like ID before. Everyone's IDs are unique. That's how we identify the specific task, right? That's why all of our Cornell IDs are different. So we're just going to keep it simple and make our task IDs just like integers, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. As long as we always keep making, the last used index plus 1, we're never going to have like conflicting IDs, right? So our first task is going to be index or ID 0. So that'll be the key. And then the value is going to be a dictionary object. This dictionary is going to represent the task. There's going to be a few fields in this dictionary object to represent the task. The first thing will be the ID, which is going to be 0. The next thing is a description, which is whatever I want it to be. Slide in a sec. And then the last thing will be done. And then that can be just false, I guess. So I'm not done with this task yet. So I don't know. What's something I haven't done yet? Pre-order the new Pokemon game or something. I don't know. You couldn't tell from lecture 2 already, I really like Pokemon. Anyway, that's besides the point. So that's the first task. All right, let's do the second task. All right, ID 1. In similar vein, ID is 1. Description is let's see. Watch a baseball game or something. I've definitely done this, so we can put done is true. Just gonna minimize the terminal real quick. And since we're representing data in a Python dictionary, we have to have some way of keeping track of the ID, right? So like I mentioned earlier, the ID we're going to be using is going to be a unique integer every time. Now, a value that's not in this dictionary yet is 2, right? If you add a task with ID 2, the next value that isn't going to be in this dictionary is 3. So we can just like kind of keep incrementing this ID value. And so the way we're going to do that is by keeping track of what the last ID was, which we can just call task ID counter. Actually, instead of keeping track of what the next, or instead of keeping track of what the last ID was, we're going to keep track of what the next ID will be. So this is 2. Okay, so that's the data setup. Does everything make sense so far? Any questions? Cool. I'm going to change this back to the slash world so I don't sound egotistical. And let's make our first what's called an endpoint. So our first URL that we're actually going to be using to interact with this data that we just created. So the first one is going to be called tasks. So this syntax right here. And make sure you don't forget this trailing slash. I'm going to mention this one. I'm probably going to have to mention it multiple times again. But in the programming assignment, if you look at your endpoint name and you don't seem like you're hitting it, it's probably one of the first things you should check is if you're missing this trailing slash. So, oh, I should not have a colon there. So yeah, where there's going to be a trailing slash there. And the function name doesn't particularly matter. It'll be important when you write test cases, which we won't cover, but so you should make it like something that, makes sense. But at least for the scope of this course, the function name doesn't particularly matter. So what we want to do is, return this tasks object, right? So when the front end hits this endpoint, we return them the tasks that we have, all of the tasks that we have. So the way we're going to do that is by returning it as in a dictionary format. So the result will be another dictionary. The key will be tasks. And then the value is going to be a bit complicated, but list tasks dot values. I need another closing bracket there. So what this does is it takes all the values, not the keys, only the values in the Python dictionary and converts it into a list. So it's going to put this and put this into a list and then return it to us. Make sense so far? Cool. So now we have this result or like res object, or sorry, response object, and we want to return it. So we'll just do return response. Okay, now that we have that, let's hit that endpoint, right? So instead of ABC, we'll hit tasks. And boom. So I have a Chrome extension that puts like JSON formatted objects into like a neatly formatted thing. Don't worry if it doesn't look like this. As long as you can see your tasks, you should be good. So I think we have one TA here again. So if you ever need help, raise your hand. Thanks, Mateo. You're amazing. Okay. So is everyone good so far? Any questions? Am I too slow? Am I too fast? Too quiet? Too loud? Good. Okay, cool. So now we have a function for getting all the tasks, right? Here comes the cooler part, like creating a task. We want to do that too. So the way we're going to do that is by doing app.route. And we can call the endpoint the same thing as long as the request method that we're going to be using to hit the endpoint is different. So hopefully all of you have downloaded this app called Postman. This was part of lecture 1 and also part of the pre-class to-dos. So let's quickly just go over how we're going to get set up with using Postman. So the first thing we're going to do is create a workspace. A workspace is kind of just like, like if you're working on a specific project, you want to be using that workspace. If you're in a particular class, you want to be using that workspace. So I'm going to hit on workspace. Let me zoom in real quick. Let's click create workspace. I'll call it backend course fall 22. And then I'll just make it a personal workspace. And I'll create the workspace. Cool. So now we have this workspace. And in this workspace, we can create requests that we're going to be using to test our backend. So what you just saw here in our browser is actually a request. We're making a GET request to the endpoints that we're hitting, a GET request. So remember the 4 that we're going to be using. Well, actually, the 3 we're going to be using because put and post are basically interchangeable in terms of usage. The 3 we're going to be using are get, post, and delete. Post is for creating and updating objects. Get is for getting, and delete is for deleting. The browser by default can only get resources, but the front end can code buttons so that they like make post requests or delete requests. That's how like Instagram has like a new post button and like a delete button and stuff like that, right? So the browser can't do this by default. So we're going to be using Postman. And here you can specify what your request type is going to be. So first, let's start off by creating a new collection. This is just going to be a folder for like, our specific sub project. So this will be demo 1. I'll just call it demo 1. And then within this collection, you can see right here, it says add a request to start working, right? So add a request. and you can see that it's called new request. Oops. So let's call this request get all tasks. And the URL is the same as up here. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. Sorry, I keep doing that. And then if I hit send, you can see that I get this like, output of tasks in a very neatly formatted way. Now, if your Postman doesn't actually look like this right now, go ahead and click on this gear icon, settings, and then under language detection, you can change this to JSON. And this will make it so that all your outputs are always going to be in JSON format. Cool. So that's for getting all the tasks. Creating a task is going to be a post request, right? Post is to create or update a resource. So back to our code, the way we can specify that we want to be using a post request to hit this endpoint is by typing comma after the endpoint, methods, plural, equals, and then in a array or like a list, we type post. So again, this is just syntactic stuff that you're gonna have to memorize. So this specifies that I want to hit this tasks endpoint with a post request as opposed to a get request. A get request is default, so you don't have to specify it up here, but if you really want, you can as well. So let's call this function create task. And so now we actually want to be taking in input from the front end, right? Like, how's the backend supposed to know what your task description is going to be, what, and stuff like that. So to retrieve the task description from the front end, we have to take in information that's sent to us from the front end through the request body. So again, the multiple parts of the request is the URL, the request method, and then the request body. So the request body is where you can send in information to the backend. This is going to be raw, and then you can change this to JSON. Oops, JSON. So this is the request body, and we're going to be sending in information to the backend through the request body. So back to the code. You don't actually have to do this. This is for the post request. I'll show it again. I'll just do it again in a sec. But yeah, here we can retrieve the request body and put it into a variable called body. And to do that, we have to type json.loads request.data. So this is going to take the request body and put it into the body object or variable, sorry. And the way we can retrieve the description field, right? Because that's what we want for creating a new task. When we create a new task, we want the description of it, right? The way we can retrieve it is by doing description equals body dot get description. By the way, this is syntactically very similar to this because body is a dictionary. But the only difference with body.get description is if there is no description, instead of crashing, it just returns none or null in Java's case. So we retrieve the description and we want to create a new task object. So this new task object is going to look very, very similar to these up here. Sorry, my screen might be a bit too big, but these up here, it's going to be very similar to that. So let's just copy the syntax of that. ID, right? We want some ID, don't know what it is yet. Description is the description object we just or the variable we just retrieved. And maybe let's just put that, oops, I forgot a comma here. Don't forget that. Maybe let's just say that a task that we newly created is not done by default. We still haven't finished it. So I'll just put default is to false. Cool. And now we want to add this task object to the tasks dictionary, right? This big dictionary that contains all our information. We want to add it to that dictionary. So the way we'll do that is tasks. And remember, the key is like the ID of the task, right? The key is ID of the task. So this will be that same key, which I'll show you how to do in a sec, equals this task object. Oops, task object. And then finally, we want to return this task. Cool. So the optimal way of returning a dictionary in JSON format actually isn't just returning the dictionary in Python format. We can convert this to a JSON format by doing json.dumps and then the dictionary, the Python dictionary. This converts it to a JSON format. So we'll do the same thing down here. We'll return the task that we just created or created, yeah. json.dumps task. So if you recall, there's these things called status codes, right? Associated with every response. So status code 404 is not found. Status code 200 is successful. Also, cool thing about status codes is everything that's in the 200 to 300 range is like a successful response. Everything from the 400 to 499 range is like something that the client did wrong. So the front end, right? The user did something wrong, like say an incorrect password, or you requested a resource that doesn't exist, 404. 500 to 599 status code is something wrong with the server. So 200 is successful, 400 is client side, 500 is server side error. Cool. So a successful retrieval is just a status code of 200. So the way we can specify this up here is just by typing comma and then the actual like the status code. For get test, that would be 200. And for creating a new resource, the status code is 201. So we can specify that down here as well, 201. Okay, now let's address the issue here, right? We don't know what the ID is. If you recall earlier, the ID we have stored in this variable called task ID counter. Python's kind of quirky. You can't really like directly access this variable unless you specify that you want this global variable that kind of exists in the global scope of this file. So the way we're going to do that is by typing global and then the variable name. And like we said earlier, the invariant for this global this variable is that it's always going to contain the ID of the next task. Next task. Okay. So we can actually just paste that variable like in these empty slots right here. And the one thing we cannot forget to do is that this task ID counter, we want it to refer to the next ID we're going to be using, right? So if we just use that ID, we want to actually increment it. So we can do that by doing task ID counter plus equals 1. Okay, I went through a lot there. Does anyone have any questions? Make sense? Okay, hopefully this all this makes sense. So let's actually use this function, right? Let's actually test it. So we have this this request called get all tasks. We can create a new request. Hit this like drop down and hit add request. And now let's call this create new task or something. And the URL is actually going to be identical, right? The only thing that's different is the request method. So the URL we can just copy from the get all tasks and change this to a post request. And now that we've done that, we actually have to pass in information to the backend, right? Being the description. So back to the body, right? Click on body, click on raw, hit the text dropdown to JSON. Deactivate Grammarly. Why is it doing that? I don't need Grammarly for Postman, I think. Okay, in curly braces, right? JSON is also very similar to a dictionary. The key is description, right? And what's the next task? I should do, I don't know, edit and upload this lecture or week 1 demo. Cool. So let's make that the new task that I need to do. Also, make sure you save it. Make sure you save all your requests. If you see this orange circle, it means that it hasn't been saved. So hit Command S if you're on a Mac, Control S if you're on a Windows. And yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and click on send. Let's see what happens. Wow. So this new task object was returned to us, right? The ID is 2, right? We had an ID of 0 and an ID of 1, and now we have an ID of 2. The description is what we specified it to be, and done is false because we're not done with it yet. The really cool thing now is if we go back to get all tasks and hit this endpoint again by hitting send, wow, we can see that a third object has been created, the third post. So you can already from week 1, you can kind of start seeing how like Instagram and those kind of posting apps start functioning, right? By hitting post, you kind of create a post request to the backend, which then stores it. And then when you do get all posts or something along those lines, it kind of returns all the posts along with your newly added post. Cool. So that is the that is the create task function. Let's move on. We have 3 more to get through. The syntax is going to be very similar, so I might start speeding up a tad bit, but slow me down if you need me to. So app.route, tasks, oops. And then we want to now be able to create a function for retrieving a specific task, right? So like, I don't want all the tasks, I just want one of them. So this is analogous to like, say if you're on Instagram and you click on one post, you want to just see that post, right? So we can do that is by passing in the task ID through the URL. So if I pass in 2, I should see the newly created task I just made. If I pass in 1, I should see, what was it, the baseball game one. And then if I pass in 0, I should only see the Pokemon one. So the way we do that is by typing in triangular brackets int : task ID. So what this does, it's specifying that this this object that you're going to be passing in through the URL is going to be an integer, and this task ID is the ID of the task that we're trying to pass in. So IRL example again, if you go to like ed discussion, right? You see edsem.us/courses, you see this number. This is actually the ID of the course that we're currently in. So if I like go to a different class, you can see that the ID is different, right? So passing in IDs through the URL is something we're going to be doing commonly, and this is how we retrieve it in the backend. Get task. So when you pass in a variable or like some information through the URL, you actually have to put it in the parameter here. So we'll just do task ID because that's what it's called. Now we're going to try and retrieve the task, right? So task equals the tasks dictionary dot get, and then the task ID. So from the big tasks dictionary, we're retrieving the task with the task ID. Again, if the task is not found, this .get function in Python is pretty neat because instead of throwing an error, it like returns none or null. So we can check if this task is none. And if it's none, then it's the error code that we're all familiar with, 404. It wasn't found. So we'll do return json.dumps. And in dictionary format, again, the error being task not found. And then the status code will be 404. Otherwise, if we clear this if statement, then that means that the task was found. So then we'll just return the task json.dumps task to a 200 because it was successfully found. If it really bugs you, you can put an else statement here, I guess, but not necessary. Cool. So I'm going to switch to Postman real quick, but feel free to copy it once I switch back. So I'm going to create a new request. Call it get specific task. Or get task by ID is actually a better name. By ID. And let's copy the URL from back here for get all tasks. Again, the Postman stuff is not as important. You can just go ahead and go back and watch the recording if you missed this part. But yeah, so the syntax is tasks, and then another slash, a backslash, and then the ID, and then another slash, right? So I'll do tasks /1, for example, and then slash again. And this will give me the baseball game task only. Or if I hit 0, oops. Oh, that's 9. But you can see that if I type 9, then there was no task with ID 9, so it will give me task not found. Also, cool thing, the error code is right here. So 404 is right here, right? If I pass in a valid task, it's 200. 200, okay. Create new task was 201. I created. All right, so you can see the status code of the response on Postman as well. So that's what makes Postman really nice and useful for you guys' debugging. Next, endpoint. Another app.route. Tasks. And the same thing in task ID. So this time we're specifying, we also want to retrieve a specific task, but with that specific task, we want to edit it. So let's say we want to update it so that the task is actually now done, right? Because done is always false by default. So we need to have a way to change it. Or if the description is bad, we want to change the description. That's also okay. This is for updating a task. Cool. So does anyone, again, have a guess on what the method would be here? Yeah. Yes, it would be put. For this class, we're going to be using post just to like make things more simple. But put is also a valid one. Thank you. So we'll call this update task, passing the task ID here, right? And a lot of it is going to be very similar to the get task function. So I'm going to use my favorite tool in programming, which you guys should adopt as well, copy and pasting. Right, so these first two lines, get the task, and if it's not, or first three lines, sorry, get the task, and if it's not found, then it'll return an error. And now if we did find the task, then we want to update it, right? So again, a post method, a post request is going to have a request body. So we want to retrieve the body again. Body equals json.loads request.data. And we'll retrieve the description. So similar to up here, very, very similar. Description is body.get description. And done is also body.get done. And then we'll update the task object that we have like in the variable task. So task description will be this new description that's stored in our variable, and task done is going to be the new done that we just retrieved from this variable as well. Any questions? Make sense? Okay, cool. In a few more seconds to copy it down. All right, let's go back to Postman. Let's actually test this endpoint. So we currently have, right, say like the task 0, right? Pre-order the new Pokemon game. Done is false. Oh yeah, I haven't done it yet. So false, yeah. Let's create a new request. And let's call it update task by ID. And it's the same URL as the get task by ID. So I'm just going to go there and copy it and paste it here. Make this a post request. And again, since it's a post request, we're going to be passing in information to the backend, which we can do by hitting this body raw JSON and in this dictionary format. So the description is going to remain the same. So what was it before? It was pre-order the new Pokemon game, and done will be now true. Note the syntax in JSON, like Booleans are lowercase, all lowercase, but in Python, the first letter is capitalized. So just quick note on that. But yeah. So let's first get all our tasks, right? We have ID 0, pre-order the new Pokemon game, done is false. ID 1, watch the baseball game, done is true. Let's update it. Let's actually hit this endpoint, right, with the specified request body. And we get returned the object that was just updated. So if I go back to get all tasks, this is currently false. If I hit it again, it's now true. So we have successfully updated our pre-existing tasks. And same thing like with get task by ID. if we hit the 0, right, this used to be false, but now if I hit this, it's true. And like, I don't know, I can like change the description too. So like, 2. Oh, my Postman is being buggy. But yeah, you can change the description, and if you hit the endpoint, you'll see that your description will also get updated. Cool. Any questions? Still good? All right, we're going strong. Last one. All right, we got this. The last one is to delete a task. So tasks, and then same deal again, because we want to specify which task to delete. Right? We don't want to delete every single task. And the method for that is going to be one. Oh, I heard it somewhere here. No? Guy? What is the method going to be, guys? Delete. Thank you. Okay. So it's going to be a delete method. We're going to call the function delete task ID. All right. And then again, the very same deal here. So I'm just going to try and retrieve the task if it exists. If it doesn't, throw an error. And if it does exist, we want to delete this task. The key value pair in the big tasks dictionary. And the way we do that in Python is just by typing del for delete, the name of the dictionary, and then the key, so task ID. And then we'll still return JSON.dumps task and 200. 200 is also the success code for deleting a task. They're deleting a resource. So the reason why we still want to return this like task object, even though we just deleted it, is because like if you delete something, you kind of want a confirmation that you like deleted the right thing, right? So it's just for the sake of that. Cool. I don't see as much typing, so I'm assuming most people are done copying. Yeah. Okay, great question. So to repeat it, for deleting a task, do we need to reduce this variable right here, task ID counter? The answer is no, because if let's say we created like 3 tasks, right? We have IDs 0, 1, and 2 being used, and we delete task ID, and then like, if we have 0, 1, and 2, then the variable is going to contain 3, right? Because it points to the next ID we're going to use. If we delete, like say task number 1, right? Task ID counter would then go back to 2, and we can't reuse 2, right? So yeah, this invariant is only going to be like really taken care of in the create task function. But good question. Cool. So let's go to Postman again, and let's get all tasks. Right, we have our 2 tasks here, and we can create our one last request. Add request. Again, the same endpoint as the 2 we've been using in the past 2 endpoints. So getting a task and updating a task to the same endpoint. Paste it here. Let's call this delete task by ID. And this will be a delete. Yes. Okay, cool. So if I hit this delete endpoint, as you may expect, we got all tasks. It has 2 tasks, but if you hit the endpoint and specify the correct ID, it'll delete it, right? It'll return the thing it just deleted. And now if I go to get all tasks, it'll only have the one task that remains. And if we try to get the task that just got deleted, it'll be like, oh, task not found, because that key value pair is gone from the dictionary. Okay, does everything make sense? That is basically all of the code for today. But yeah, I just want to take some final questions unless people don't have any. Okay. The one last thing I'm going to mention is documentation. So starting last semester, we made documentation a requirement for the programming assignments. And this is, I know it's a bit annoying to do, but this is for the sake of like, good programming practices that we want you guys to have. So to type documentation in Python, it's going to be on the line after your definition function. And if you type 3 strings, it'll like create 3 more strings for you, or like 3 double quotes for you, and then you'll type in your documentation here. So this can be really, really, really simple. Like this is literally just going to be returns all tasks. And then this is going to be creates a new task. And this is going to be, oops, gets a task by its ID. And so on. So this is going to be required for your programming assignments. If you don't do this, you'll lose style points. But again, it's really simple, so make sure you do it. And it takes like literally less than a minute. Updates a task by its ID. And deletes a task by its ID. For very convoluted methods, like for example, this one's kind of long, right? The way you would type in comments in Python for like, comments for like a specific like singular line or like a few lines is by typing the hashtag. So like, for example, retrieve description and done from request body or something. So these are optional. It's nice to have. It'll look much nicer for us too. But these doc strings telling us what each of the functions do are going to be required. So make sure you don't forget those. And this is for every function, I guess for like hello as well. You can write one. Greets you. I don't know, something like that. Cool. Okay, so we have about 7 minutes left. We'll use the last 5 minutes on Kahoot. So one last thing I wanted to show is these Postman collections that you create for like each demo, each programming assignment, and so on. So you'll be assigning, or you'll be submitting the Postman collections that you create, and that's for us to be able to check that you know how to test your code using Postman, right? So the way you're gonna submit that to us is, and I'm gonna link a video on how to do this later as well, but you can just click hit view more actions. And then if you hit this button, I think you can scroll all the way down and there's like this export button. And you can just stick with the recommended version, hit export, and it'll tell you where you want to save it. I'll just put it in like, I don't know, my downloads folder. And it'll say that this was successfully exported. And this will be part of your submission. It's just like a JSON file that, why is this opening in Xcode? It's just a JSON file that has basically all the information about the Postman request that you made. So we'll just be skimming through this, but make sure you submit this as well, so it'll be part of your grade. Okay, that's it for demo this week. Hopefully this kind of gives you a brief idea of how this course is going to go. It's very fun, interacting with data and stuff. But yeah, before we move on to Kahoot, any final questions? Good. Yeah, what's up? Save a collection or request? The JSON file? Oh, I mean, you can watch the video again for that. So yeah, it'll be uploaded on YouTube tonight. Yeah, okay. Yes, if you're going to be using the same terminal for another project. But otherwise, like if you close VS Code, it'll just like close it for you. Did you have a question back there? Okay. Oh, one last thing I wanted to show everyone. This server is going to be always running. The way you can stop it is Control-C. I think that's the case on Windows and Mac. So try doing that. Just see if it works. Yeah, Control-C will stop the server from running. Okay, that was a lot, but hopefully that was fun. I guess we can get started with the Kahoot now.